Hey there, my name's Greg. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made this chorizo and seafood stew. I made this with my chorizo astoriano that I made recently. The chorizo came out really tasty, a little bit strong on the flavors, a little bit much to eat on its own, but I think it will be perfect in a seafood stew like this. Let me show you how I made this stew, chowder, soup, whatever you want to call it. Leave me a comment if you think this is a soup, a chowder, or a stew. I'm going to start by getting my ingredients together, starting with my homemade chorizo. Going to make a mirepoix with onion, carrots, and celery. I'm also going to mince up some garlic. Just like that, got about a half pound of dry cured Spanish chorizo. Got 2 cups of onion, 1 cup of carrot, 1 cup of celery for my mirepoix. And I also minced up 6 medium cloves of garlic. Feel free to use more or less. Garlic's always up to you, you know? All of it's always up to you. Now let's go over to the stove and get started. All right, Delia, I heard you fart. I know, you need to go out. With my mise en place all ready, I'm ready to start building this soup. I'll start by browning my chorizo over medium heat in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. While the chorizo starts to brown, I'm gonna dice this potato. You can see that I've diced them pretty small, and that's because I want them to start kind of disintegrating into the broth. That's part of what will thicken the broth. And I'm using a russet potato because they're starchy. You could use a Yukon Gold, but I would stay away from a red potato because they're not very starchy, and it's that starch that's gonna help thicken this soup, chowder, stew, whatever you want to call it. This is a chorizo astoriano, and it's very fatty. It's got like 40% fat instead of the normal 30%. So it's rendered out quite a bit of fat. It's starting to brown. I'm gonna remove it with a slotted spoon so I can leave behind all that rendered fat, which is the first layer of flavor. Now in this flavored oil, I'm gonna cook my mirepoix. It's not hard to make a good soup, but a good soup is built in layers. If we just put this all in and cooked it, it would not be as good as this is going to be. It's really not that hard to use a little technique and cook in layers. Just going to let this cook for about 5 minutes. I'll stir it occasionally to make sure it's cooking evenly. I think I may have forgot to turn my camera on when I added my garlic, but I added that just as the veggies were getting soft. It's been about 30 seconds, just long enough to soften that garlic. Then I'm going to go in with a tablespoon of tomato paste. Going to stir that tomato paste around. Let it mix in, and that's just going to add a real nice depth of color, add a little acidity, just another layer of flavor for this soup. After that tomato paste is cooked off for a couple minutes, I'm going to go in with some white wine, 1 cup. I'm going to turn the heat up, and I'm just going to reduce this down by about 1/4. It should only take a few minutes at high. Once that's started to reduce, you can see it's looking a little bit thicker. I'm going to go in with 1.5 tablespoons paprika, a couple teaspoons of thyme, mix that in. Going in with 2 cans of crushed tomatoes, 1 8-ounce jar of clam juice, and 6 cups of chicken broth. I'm using homemade broth that I made, and half of what I'm adding is duck stock because that's what I have. This is also when I'm going to add my potatoes, as well as a teaspoon of salt and a few cracks of pepper. Once this comes up to a nice simmer, I'm going to turn the heat down to maintain that simmer, and I'm going to add my chorizo back in. Making sure to get as much of that rendered fat as I can. Now I've got this just below medium, right around medium, maybe a little below, just so it keeps a nice simmer like that for about 20 minutes. It's been 20 minutes. See, these potatoes are definitely cooked all the way. It's kind of thickening this just a little bit, not a lot. You wouldn't expect it to thicken it like a roux. I'm going to turn my heat all the way down so that this just stays at the lowest of simmers. Going to add 1 cup of frozen corn and 1 cup of heavy cream. Give that a quick stir. I like to have a little bit of shellfish in the shell when I make a soup like this. So I'm going in with my mussels now because they're going to take the longest. Clams would be really good in here too. All right, see how it's getting just a bare minimal bubble. Don't know if you can see that. See, it's just barely bubbling here and there. That's just the simmer I want, just the lightest of simmers. All right, now that my mussels have a few minute head start, I'm gonna go in with the rest of my seafood. I'm using 1 pound of rockfish, fresh caught off the Oregon coast. I'm going in with a 1/2 pound of bay scallops because they cook real quick. I'm going in with a 1/2 pound of squid because I like it. You can use whatever combination of seafood you want. And I'm also going in with a 1/2 pound of shrimp. These are kind of medium-sized shrimp. If you're using jumbo shrimp, you might give them an extra minute. If you're using the real small ones, I would avoid that because they're usually low quality. But if that's what you got to do, just put them in at the very end. They cook real fast. Give it a quick little taste for salt. It does need a pretty healthy pinch of salt. Now I'm just going to give this about 3 minutes for all that seafood to just barely cook. It all cooks very quick. Just keeping it at the lowest of simmers, the lowest of heat. And then we're going to be ready to eat this thing. I'm pretty darned excited. Oh my goodness, look at that soup. That's looking great. Super thick, really hearty. Make sure to get a little bit of everything. Some squid, at least one mussel. Oh yeah, some broth. Looking good. I'm going to garnish that with a little bit of parsley and serve it with some toasted pieces of baguette. All right, ready to eat this. I'm really excited. It's been smelling really good in here for about the last hour. Really doesn't take too long to make this. 1 pot meal, took maybe an hour. Oh yeah. Oh man. Oh, that broth is so good. It's rich with the cream. It's a little thick because the potatoes just started falling apart. It's really balanced well with the acidity from the wine and the tomatoes. They balance out with that heaviness of the cream. And it gets a lot of the viscosity from the potato. Try a piece of this seafood here. Shrimp is perfect. Let's try a piece of the squid. Squid is perfect too. Squid's a little tricky, but if you just flash cook it, just a few minutes, it's tender. Or if you slow cook it, let it just simmer for like a half hour or so, then it becomes tender again. But anywhere in the middle, it's a little chewy and rubbery. Here, let me try one of these mussels. Oh, and the fish. Fresh rockfish from the Oregon coast. It's so tasty. Well, every type of the seafood in here is cooked just perfect. Oh yeah, a little bit of toasty baguette dipped in that broth. So good. There's a piece of chorizo. Oh, that's really good. It's perfect in here. It's a little really nice acidic bite to it. Quite a lot of tang, but it pairs perfectly with all this. So is this a soup, a stew, or a chowder? Could definitely be a chowder. It's got the cream, it's got potatoes, got the corn. Could definitely be a chowder. Could it be called a stew? It's definitely got lots of stuff in it. The meat to broth ratio, in my mind, is very stew-like. I think what they teach you in a culinary school, which I have never gone to, but it's my understanding, stew is usually tough cuts of meat that have been cooked a long time or stewed for a long time until they become tender. Usually there's some flour in there to thicken it up, whether it's added to the liquid or often it's just coating on the meat before it's browned off, and then that browned meat is used to build the stew. But that flour on the edge helps thicken the stew. Chowders, technically, I think, are supposed to have a roux. So this was not made with the roux. So I think in the classic sense, it may not be a chowder. I think it meets what people think of as a chowder, though. It's thick, it's rich, it's hearty, it's got potatoes, it's got the cream, pork element. I think it's a chowder, but I think technically it's really a soup. And you can't go wrong if you call it a soup. All chowders are soups. All stews are soups. Not all soups are a stew or a chowder. So leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Whatever you want to call it, I don't really care. This is freaking delicious. I hope you give it a try. All right, guys, I got to stop filming this. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you're still watching this video right now, you damn well should subscribe. See how I made this chorizo astoriano. If you're feeling generous today and you want to support me making these videos, you can throw a tip my way with the super thanks. But whatever you do, make sure you're putting some love into the food that you make. Peace. So good. That's the tastiest meal I've made in a while.